Well, I felt really underwhelmed with last night's Thursday night game. It just wasn't the best game that we could have saw in fantasy football terms. Obviously, Denver's defense did great, but just wanted to go live again tonight, guys. It is Friday night. I am home alone with my pooch, and we are just looking to answer some fantasy football questions. If my pooch wants to hop in and answer one for you, he knows because he lives with me. So my pooch knows, man. So he's sitting in here with me right now. You guys can't see him. But we're just going to answer some fantasy questions tonight. It's a Friday night. We're looking to have just a good time. So make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already to show support. That is all I ask of you guys. And we'll get into some questions right now. Nate Dogg, what's going on? You here early, man. Good to see you tonight. All right, chat, hear me out. I'm trading for Derrick Henry, Marvin Harris Jr., and Aubrey, and giving J.K. Dobbins, Michael Wilson, Tucker Kraft, Chase Brown, and $30 FAAB. Am I giving too much? Okay, so you're giving away you're trading for Derrick Henry, Marvin, and Aubrey, giving Dobbins, Michael Wilson, Tucker Kraft, Chase Brown, $30 FAAB. No, I don't think that's too much. I really don't mind it. I think that, honestly, my big gripe with it is the $30 FAAB. Because really what it comes down to for me a lot of the times is, like, especially late in the year, that FAAB usually comes in handy. So when you're giving up the FAAB in part with it, it really makes it a lot more difficult for me to get on board with it because, like, I'll give you an example. Like, over the past 10 years, over more than a decade of playing fantasy, a lot of my wins have come from my late grabs on the waiver wire. Well, the reason I could do it is because I had capital to do it with, right? So when you're talking about giving up $30 FAAB, if you start out the year with $100 in FAAB, you're giving away already like almost 33% of your FAAB away. So, and at this point, like, the chances are good you don't have 100% of your FAAB right now. So it makes it a little tougher for me to get on board with this one, to be honest with you. But I do see your point. Like, I really do. You have 100. If you have $100, then it's not too much. I'm just giving my concern with the deal because I like getting Henry, obviously, and I like getting Marvin too. I think Marvin is in really good position to do much better in fantasy. And I don't think, like, I love JK, but I don't think giving JK up is particularly too bad. And then obviously giving up Michael Wilson is nothing big. Giving up Tucker Kraft is nothing big. Giving up Chase Brown might become a big deal at some point, but I really don't think that you're making a terrible move here by getting a league-winning running back with Derrick Henry and getting a potentially really good second half of the season wide receiver. So I like the move overall, I would say. The only concern, like I said, I really don't have a problem with any of the players that you're giving up. My main concern is going to be with the capital as far as the FAAB goes that you're giving up for it. Because the FAAB is definitely, the FAAB is definitely tough. The FAAB is definitely tough to let go of for me personally. But I do think the move is overall pretty good and a move that I would personally do myself. Next up, we have Chaluto. What's going on, man? Good to see you in here tonight. William Barnes, what's going on? Hey, should I trade Montgomery and Njigba for Drake London? I'm cool with that. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that's a fine move because, Montgomery's great. I love David Montgomery. I've seen people call him a buy or a sell high this week. I really don't personally agree with it. But if you can get a Drake London, that's a different story. Like I said, like I repented on this one several weeks back because I was wrong. I was definitely wrong about this whole Drake London thing. The dude is going to be really good in fantasy. So, yeah, I'm on board with getting Drake London, and I don't think this is too particularly expensive. And you have the flexibility with Jack Smith-Njigba, who can go in your flex every now and then. Dizzy B, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat tonight. Cook, Gibbs, Chuba, Bigsby, sit one. I gotta sit Tank, unfortunately. I called Tank Bigsby a must start, obviously. On the must start video, I just started doing them, actually. Let me know in the chat if you like those videos. I just started doing must start videos of guys that I have extreme conviction on in fantasy football. and in the particular week, and Tank Bigsby was one of those guys. He was on the list for me in that video this week. And really, like, I try to go deeper than just surface level guys. Like, yeah, you must start Derrick Henry this week. You must start Justin Jefferson. So I go deeper with those, like, mid-range, like, flex guys sometimes. But when you've got guys like this, like, obviously you're not sitting James Cook. He's ready to go. Gibbs, you're not sitting him either. I actually think Gibbs is going to be pretty decent play. And Chuba really has separated. Like, Chuba is a great play. And I think this week could be a really good week for Chuba as well. So, as much as I love Bigsby this week, if you were talking about Tank Bigsby versus Chase Brown, I would say Tank Bigsby. If you were talking about Tank Bigsby versus Alexander Madison, obviously Tank Bigsby, right? But you're not talking about that. You're talking about a different situation here. So I've got to go with Chuba, Gibbs, and Cook in my lineup and sit Tank Bigsby. I appreciate the super chat. Those of you who want your question answered immediately, the super chat's the best way to go. Bruce Caldry, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Your thoughts on using Bowers as a flex in full PPR tournament? Thanks. I appreciate your efforts. Well, I appreciate you being in here supporting the channel. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally fine with it. I mean, the guy shouldn't leave your lineup. That's for sure. Like, if he's, if you have an open tight end spot, then he should obviously be there. I don't know who you're working with the tight end, but there's not many better. I mean, let's just look at it right now. Tight ends right now, we're looking at George Kittle and Brock Bowers as number 1 and 2. I mean, that's how good both of them have been. That's how great Bowers has been. We know Kittle he's got potential to give you this 14.5 fantasy points per game. Like, we understand that's in his arsenal. But Bowers giving you 10.7 fantasy points per game, that's a legit thing, man. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big deal for sure. And I don't, again, at this point, there's a lot of guys who can't give you that type of upside at the flex spot. Like, you're going with guys that are, like, averaging 9 fantasy points per game or 9.5 fantasy points per game or 10. So you're basically playing with around the same guys. Bottom line for me is he shouldn't go on your bench. Like, that's my bottom line. So, yeah, I mean, I'm totally fine with doing it for sure. I appreciate your super chat, too. Fake Quee, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start 1. Brian Thomas Jr., Chase Brown, Hill, or Ayuk? I got to go with Brian Thomas Jr. here. Yeah, it makes sense because the matchup is good against New England, I think. I don't worry about it. People have asked me, like, when does Christian Gonzalez, the Patriots' number 1 corner, when does he get into that Pat Surtain level? And my answer is when he starts doing it on a consistent basis. I mean, we haven't seen it yet from Christian Gonzalez. Like, he missed most of his rookie year, which was last year. So he's basically a rookie this year, and he's been beaten. Like, he's done well, but he's been beaten as well. So, you know, I'm not really afraid of it. Chase Brown is honestly in a little bit of a negative matchup this week. The Browns defense is looking tougher all of a sudden. And obviously, I've said it a bunch. I'm kind of looking for excuses to sit Ayuk or to sit Tyreek Hill. And it's not that I want to, like, sit him just because I hate him. Like, obviously, I drafted Tyreek everywhere. I love the player, but, I mean, we're just not looking at a good play right now. I mean, let's just, like, put it into context really quick with Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill right now in a half PPR format is the wide receiver 38. Now, keep in mind he missed the game because they obviously had the bye week here. But Tyreek Hill on a per-game basis. By the way, shout out to Fantasy Pros. I'll give him a quick shout-out for putting all the stats up week by week. Since Tua was gone, 5.1 fantasy points, 5.5, 6.2, and 9.9. I mean, there's just nothing there with Tyreek Hill, man. There's nothing there. And Ayuk, I actually kind of like him too, but Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 11 on the year, and Brian Thomas Jr., his worst game has been last week against one of the best, if not the best, defenses against wide receivers. I mean, this is a top-tier team in the secondary. So, yeah, I've got to go with Brian Thomas Jr. this week. The matchup is just so much better in his situation. Alexis Bolanos, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat tonight. Someone offered Achane for Najee. What do we think? Oh, yeah, I would take that for sure. Listen, Achane is hard to get on board with. But when we're talking about like let's just look at Devon Achane really quick. Devon Achane, running back 27. Again, keep in mind, he didn't play last week because of a bye. Najee's a couple spots ahead of him, and they haven't had their bye yet. He's the running back 24 in a half PPR format. And Achane is averaging 11.9 fantasy points per game, while Najee is averaging 10.7 fantasy points per game. So, there's a lot here with Devon Achane as far as, like, his upside compared to Najee's. Because, Achane obviously hasn't, again, been great since Tua was out. But, if we can get Tua back, then that's going to raise the upside. And I do think that he just naturally has more upside than Najee does long season. Because Jaylen Warren's coming back, and he's getting more touches as well. Which may, depending on what you think about it, may help him. Because of last week, like what we saw was that he got a big help. And Najee had the best game of his year last week. So without a doubt, it could end up helping Najee in the long run. But Achane just has simply way more upside than Najee does long season. It's really not particularly close. So yeah, I would definitely take that. Like right now, you know that gif of Kramer from Seinfeld when he was doing business with someone and he like got up and shook their hand immediately before they could get any more words out. Like that's how I would feel about this particular trade right here. Appreciate the super chat, Alexis Bolanos. Nate Dogg, what's going on, man? Appreciate the super chat. They said nah. LOL. Should I try to put in Hill in the trade instead of Chase Brown? That kind of becomes too much, I think. Let me go back up to your trade really quick to make sure I'm getting it right. So you're getting Derrick Henry, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Aubrey. And you're giving J.K. Dobbins, Michael Wilson, Tucker Kraft, Chase Brown, and $30 FAAB. Again, the only guys I'm scared of giving away is J.K. Dobbins and Tyreek Hill. Honestly, I don't have a problem with the structure of this trade. Here's what I would particularly do. If it was me, I would try to get the same guys you're going for because that's clearly the guys that you want. And I would include J.K. Dobbins, Tyreek Hill, and either Wilson or Tucker Kraft, and take out the other one, and also drop the FAAB from 30 to 20 or 15. Start with 15, see if he'll take that. If not, raise it to 20. That's what I would particularly do, because at this point, you're running the risk of looking a little too desperate to get this guy, to get these three guys right here. That just looks a little too desperate to send away that much. Because, again, you're giving away, like, a really valuable starting running back with JK. And obviously, you're getting one. But Tyreek, long season, just has more upside than Chase Brown. So, he's worth more in this trade. So, you could take out the FAAB, at least cut it in half, and take out a player here between Wilson and Tucker Kraft. And I'm sure he'd probably rather have Tucker Kraft in the trade anyways above Michael Wilson. So, that's what I would particularly do, Nate Dogg, if I was in your position. Appreciate the super chat, man. Let me know how it goes. Jesse M, what's going on? See chat for the question. Let's go take a look. Jesse M. Trade Tracy and Gibson for Ingram. Half PPR. I'm 2-4, have Mark Andrews at tight end. Running backs are Najee, Bigsby, Ray Davis. Wide receivers are A.J. Brown, Chris Godwin, Brian Thomas Jr., JSN, and Puka. Okay, so we're trading Tracy and Gibson for Ingram. Who's your tight end right now? That's what I want to know. Because honestly, I mean, it's very possible that Tracy becomes your best running back. I'm not joking. Like, I've been on this one for quite a while. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is... I mean, that dude's legit. Like, he's legitimately maybe taking over. Let's just go through Tyrone Tracy. Obviously, we know what he did, right? But just let's just refresh ourselves, because I don't want you to do this one too quick. It seems a little crazy to me, unless you're just dying for a tight end. And even then, like, I just don't trust Ingram. The injury was bad. So here's what we're dealing with at the tight end position. At the running back position, I'm sorry. With Tyrone Tracy Jr., 13.5 fantasy points in a half PPR format. But when you look at it close, 18 carries right here, 129 yards, and just didn't get in the end zone. And he only had 2 targets and 1 reception for 1 yard. But overall, 7.2 yards per carry, like that's the number we need to look at. That's an incredible number in his first game as a starter. Then let's go down to Cincinnati. An easier defense, arguably. 19.7 fantasy points, obviously he goes off. Running back 7 on the week, 17 carries, 50 yards, so way less efficient, but gets a red zone touchdown here, and the targets go up, right? And I want to pull up Tyrone Tracy. Because Tyrone Tracy, he was, I've been talking about him for a lot this week, which is that I've seen from beat reporters in New York that say that Tyrone Tracy very well may have taken this backfield over already. It's very, very possible he already took it. So let me see if I can find the article that I read. Tyrone Tracy expected to see significant playing time, even with Devin Singletary back from injury. That's not what I read, but it is definitely, something to pay attention to. I can't find it. I'd have to look for it another time. But the point being is that Tyrone Tracy, I do honestly think could be your best running back. Because what you're dealing with is Najee, tank. Najee is a starter, but low upside starter. Bigsby is cross your fingers if Travis Etienne misses time at all, or if they trade him away. And Ray Davis, again, it's a handcuff back. Tyrone Tracy Jr., I think, could be your best bet. So I just don't personally love the idea of doing this myself. Because Ingram's not like Brock Bowers. And I'm not saying that you can get Brock Bowers in exchange for a Tyrone Tracy here. But this isn't the situation where it's a clear upgrade. Like Ingram, I get it. Last week, first week back. Take it easy. My dog just had surgery, so he's like shaking his head. This isn't a deal here where there's a clear upgrade. Like Ingram, first game back, I get it, did well. But unless you're like rolling out like Jatavian Sanders or Mo Alley Cox at the tight end position, I just don't really see this as like a must-do personally. If it was me, I probably wouldn't do this particular one. Andrews, your tight end. I think you're fine with him, to be honest with you. If it was me, I think I'd be all right with it. I'd keep Tyrone Tracy myself. Appreciate the super chat. Chan Dimitri, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat tonight. London, Amon-Ra, Garrett Wilson, and Amari. Trade for Wilson for who? Or trade Wilson away. Okay. So you've got 3 legitimate starting wide receivers here in fantasy. So you don't necessarily need to replace Garrett Wilson with a wide receiver here. So let's just look really quick. Garrett Wilson, I think he's like a top 9 wide receiver. Yeah, Garrett Wilson's the wide receiver 9 in fantasy football. Right now in a half PPR format. Garrett Wilson's averaging 12.8 fantasy points per game, and the 67 targets is the number that we need to look at. Garrett Wilson, 67 targets. That's going to be very hard to sustain, and based on what we're getting here on a yards per route basis here, and the touchdowns, like that's where his fantasy upside has been coming from. So Garrett Wilson with Devontae Adams, that's not going to keep up. And again, there's a market for Garrett Wilson because there's a lot of there's a market of people that think that Garrett Wilson will benefit the most from this whole deal. So if we're looking at wide receivers, like we're trying to target someone around that range, like a CeeDee Lamb, you're not going to get a Justin Jefferson for it. I wouldn't worry about it. Maybe you could get a Stephon Diggs out of it, but I personally wouldn't even try to do that. Maybe you want to do Nico Collins. Like if your team's in really good position, I would try to see if I could get a Nico Collins. Coming back in 3 weeks or so, I would love to see if I could do it. But other than that, maybe try for Neighbors. Maybe try for Terry. Mike Evans, I'm a little worried about that issue that he's suffering because we don't know enough about it. But let's look at running backs here around that range. Running back 9 is DeAndre Swift. I'm a little leery of Swift still. I don't love him on a year-long basis. I like him week to week, and we'll kind of take it from there. Bijan, I'm still not wild on. I think he's also a sell high. Chuba, I like him. I think he's a buy low, but I think you could get more than just Chuba if you did get Garrett Wilson. So if you wanted to do this type of trade, I'd be looking to get Chuba Hubbard in addition to let's go back to wide receivers. I'd be trying to get him in addition to a Jackson Smith and Jigba, Xavier Worthy, T. Higgins type is what I'd be trying to go for. Like a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 type of deal. I'm good with J.K. Dobbins. I think that J.K. Dobbins here is a great piece to get for Garrett Wilson. Brian Robinson, I would love it too. Gibbs, if you could, I doubt you'll be able to do it. But that's kind of like the group of guys. Like, you want to look at the guys around this area because, again, there's a market of people that really think that Garrett Wilson's the beneficiary of this. I'm telling you right now, he's not. I'm telling you. He's not going to be the beneficiary of it. Maybe he has a better week than Devontae this week since Devontae's a newcomer. I think Devontae's going to immediately come in and take over, personally. So I just don't think that this is a particularly good deal for Garrett Wilson here. Appreciate the super chat. Powerhouse, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Half PPR, Demario Douglas, Christian Watson, or Lad McConkey. I'm going Demario Douglas here. I called Demario Douglas a must start. So in the video that I did the other day, it's a new video. I just started doing it last week, and I had a lot of success with it. I was 5 out of 7. They all hit, and I'm really happy to do it again. So I did the video. I'm calling out particular players that I think are going to be really, really smash plays. Demario Douglas is one of them. And again, I try to go deeper than just saying start a Saquon Barkley, start a Justin Jefferson, start George Kittle. It's like, I'm trying to go deeper than that. Like, I'm trying to go for guys that are like typically thought of as like flex / like low end number 2 options at position. And Douglas is one of them. I think that Douglas is in great position this week. Number 1, he's taken on the lousiest defense versus wide receivers. The Jags defense is a disgrace. That defensive coordinator doesn't know what he's doing. Demario Douglas is also coming in. It makes it possible because Drake Maye is the quarterback now. That's the only reason this is a possibility, is because Drake Maye has taken over that team. With Jacoby Brissett, if he just did that last week, I would say that's an outlier week. Drake Maye legitimately provides upside here. So I'm actually big on this one. So yeah, I'm in on Drake Maye and Demario Douglas. I think this is actually a really good thing right here that we're watching. So I would personally go with Demario Douglas. Watson, 2 boom or bust for me. There's too many weapons, and Lad is just not. There's just not enough upside there with Justin Herbert at quarterback. There's just not. It's not that I don't like Lad McConkey. Obviously, I like Lad McConkey, but the reality is that he just doesn't have enough upside with Justin Herbert at quarterback right now. It's just not there really. So I would personally go with I'd personally go ahead and just play Mr. Demario Douglas. Appreciate the super chat. Chaludo, what's going on, my man? Good to see you. I'm 4-2. Do I ride with Hill rest of season or trade him away? I got offered Evans and Pollard for Hill and Connor. I can counter with St. Brown and Pollard or Walker. Well, you got offered Evans and Pollard for Hill and Connor. I worry about Pollard's season-long upside. I really do. I said this when I did the rest of season running back rankings last week, and it didn't play very well. And look, I stand by it because this Titans offense is a disaster. Like, at some point, Pollard won't be this effective. I mean, it just can't happen on this bad of an offense. It's even worse than Carolina's is now. And that's what, like, I trust Chuba Hubbard to do this more than I do with Tony Pollard the rest of the season. Because this offense is so atrocious. And I get it. Like, he's been really good. For 3 out of 5 games, he's done really, really good work for him. Even in week 2, like, he was still pretty good. And he's clearly the RB1 there. I get it. You know, I just think that with Connor, he's also in the same boat, though. Like, Connor is in a situation where, I say this all the time, James Conner, unfortunately, you can kind of bake in a couple missed games per year. It's just going to happen with James Conner. He's a pretty injury-prone guy. It's not that he's going to miss the whole year. He'll just miss a couple games. And his offense is higher upside, but I think it's kind of sort of close to the same category as Pollard. And getting Mike Evans is definitely better than Tyreek Hill. So I probably would do this trade. I would probably do it. It's a close one. It's not. This one I don't view as like. I like to get sneaky good, like upgrades in there. This one feels a little bit like of a lateral move. And so here's what I would say. I like the framework of this trade. I like Evans' longer season, and I like Pollard and Connor are relatively close. That's what the holdup is for me. So what I would do personally is I would not counter with St. Brown or Pollard. I would try to stick with Tyreek Hill in this trade. Because again, let's go back to Google. Let's look up Tua. I want to tell you guys what I was talking about earlier in the week, which is that obviously I've been saying for weeks, like the return date that I was reading was week 8. I've been seeing some not so great stuff. Mike McDaniel still says he won't say whether Tua will practice next week. Well, you want to know the reason for that? The NFL's got their hands all over this. I'm not paid by the NFL, so I don't need to like cover their butt. I'm telling you right now, the NFL's got their hands on this. They're controlling this because it doesn't just affect the Dolphins here. The media will go attack dog. The mainstream media, all those morons in the mainstream media, they'll go attack dog if they deem it too early for Tua to come back. This is my opinion, but I do believe, like, I don't know who's good. I don't know who disagrees with me, to be honest with you. So this thing with Tua and Tyreek, it's not going to be settled, I don't know, this week. I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe it will, and I'm just crazy. Like, it may very well be the case. I'm just telling you, like, I'm asking questions about this one. This one doesn't feel good to me. So with Evans, I still prefer him over Tyreek at this point because I just don't know. You know what, Tua's upside, when the Tua upside comes back. I just don't know. So I would do this, but here's what I would do. I would personally try to counter with getting a low-end flex on top of it. Like maybe a Demario Douglas, who just got picked up off waivers, right? Maybe a Tyrone Tracy Jr. Maybe a Tank Bigsby. Try to get them in on this trade and kind of like say the reason why is because like I'm expressing my concern with Tyreek Hill. That's what I would personally do myself. But I do like the framework, so if it doesn't work out, I probably would still ultimately do this trade. Appreciate the super chat, man. Good to see you in here tonight. Next up was Marcus Soto. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. PPR, Mahomes, Pollard, Kraft for Burrow, Higgins, and Laporta. Okay. Mahomes, Pollard, Kraft for Burrow, Higgins, and Laporta. Yeah, I would do this trade for sure. No question about it. Mahomes is just a name. I mean, he's really just a name at this point. And that's the value of having a name brand like Patrick Mahomes in fantasy football. For just kind of the casual fantasy football player, the name Mahomes is so enticing that people will give up really good deals and they don't even realize it. Like getting Burrow, like on the season, it's not even been close. Who's been better in fantasy? Joe Burrow's the quarterback 4 right now in fantasy. And again, Mahomes is coming off a bye week, but Burrow is averaging 20.4 fantasy points per game. Mahomes, he's averaging 15.3. It's not even close. We're talking about 2 different categories here. And in addition, you're getting the stack with T. And I get it, you're giving up Pollard. That's the part that maybe sucks. But again, I think long season, this is just a positive thing to do. And Laporta, I do think long season will be more valuable than Kraft. That's my personal opinion. So yes, I would absolutely 100% do this trade. Appreciate the super chat. George Brennan, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Flex Sermon or Chase Brown this week? Thanks. Yeah, I got to go Chase Brown. Sermon, literally, I cannot fake excitement for playing Trey Sermon. I just won't do it. It's just a ridiculous, Trey Sermon stinks, guys. Trey Sermon, let's go find him. Down here, buried. 4.6 yards, or fantasy points per game. Again, that's obviously because he's the backup. But Jacksonville this week was saved by touchdown and targets. Last week he didn't get the targets and he didn't get in the end zone. He still had that same level of inefficiency. He stinks. And again, the matchup's good, but I would just rather play a player I just have more belief in, which is Chase Brown. I don't love this matchup for Chase Brown, but I believe in him more than I do with Trey Sermon. This reminds me so much of how it was with Cam Akers in the first quarter of the year, which is like, Cam Akers always got this great matchup here. Should I play him? And it's like, I wouldn't do it personally because he's just not good. Trey Sermon's in that same boat. He's just not very good. So it just gives me that same type of vibe. I'm going with a player I believe in more, and that's Chase Brown. Appreciate the super chat. Big Chonger, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start one. Juju, Worthy, Najee, or Dobbs? You know, earlier in the week, I had Worthy inside my top 30, and Juju was my underdog wide receiver play of the week. And I still agree with that. Juju is... Here's my thing. Juju, if you're in a PPR league, I'd probably play Juju. Because Juju is going to get the targets. He's filling that role that Rashee Rice was playing for them. Juju Smith-Schuster. Let's go find him. I'm really interested in looking at what his snap count percentage was that week. He was in on 67% of snaps. So obviously he gets 8 targets and 7 receptions for 130 yards. That is so similar to what Rashee Rice was doing earlier this year. And I do think that he will continue to do that. With Worthy, he was more involved that week 5 game. So I'm not out on Worthy. If it was a PPR format, I would say Juju. If it's half PPR, they're close enough to where I would say Worthy, because Worthy has the big play upside. And again, I do think that he will continue to get more involved. And they're going to put him in situations they probably didn't want to put him in this early on. And just because he's a more limited player. He's still a little bit of a gadget guy in this offense. He's never going to be a target hog because he's just not big enough. He can't take enough physicality. So I would go with Worthy if it was half PPR or standard. And I would go Juju if it was a full PPR league. Appreciate the super chat, Big Chonger. Irina Worthy, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Drop Tolbert for Douglas. Start Tyreek or Juju. First of all, I would play Juju over Tyreek. I'm comfortable playing Juju over Tyreek Hill. Should I drop Tolbert for Douglas? You know, that's a tough one because obviously he's out of sight, out of mind right now because he's on a bye week, obviously. That's a little, it's a little tough because I don't know, if someone would pick him up realistically. I don't personally prefer to do this type of deal, where I drop a player just because he's out of sight, out of mind this week for a guy who could give me a SWAT start this week. Ultimately, Douglas hasn't done it long enough to unseat Tolbert in my long season rankings, but he's on his way because he's the wide receiver 1 with a functional quarterback now. I don't hate the move. I would just prefer to give up. If you have a Ray Davis and you don't have James Cook, I would give up a Ray Davis for him. If you have let's look. If you have a Darius Slayton, I would give up Darius Slayton. If you have a Rashad Bateman, I'd drop Rashad Bateman. If you have a Jerry Jeudy, I'd personally do it. But Tolbert, I'm not ready to do it quite yet, I don't think. I don't think I'm ready to quite do it yet. I would try to do it with another guy that I just named, but I'm just not ready to do it with Tolbert yet. Appreciate the super chat though. Hugo Gauthier, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat tonight. Kind of crazy, but BTJ or Ladd have PPR. I'm going Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, I'm not worried about Brian Thomas Jr. Again, I called him a buy low earlier in the week because for this exact reason. I've seen a lot of Brian Thomas Jr. questions this week asking me, what's the deal with him? Do I play him this week or is it kind of crashing down with Evan Ingram coming back? I don't see it that way because, again, he's still on the field 80% of the time basically for them. He's the number one wide receiver in that room. So even though he only had like 6 targets, he dropped a touchdown pass last week. That's not normally going to happen. So I'm playing Brian Thomas Jr. The matchup is so much better. Ladd, again, the upside just isn't there enough for me to go with Ladd this week because Ladd in a PPR format is definitely up in my rankings. Half PPR is a little different though because you're just what he's doing is he's getting 5 catches for 57 yards a week, right? He's just not getting much yards after the catch action. So I just, I'd rather go with a bigger play threat with Brian Thomas Jr. And I like the matchup a lot for both of them, but I like it for Brian Thomas Jr. and I just think that he's the better option. Appreciate the super chat, Hugo. Rich, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Which side are you taking? Marv Mason, CMC, or DK Bucky and Waddle? Full PPR. Marv Mason, CMC, or DK Bucky and Waddle? Definitely the Marv Mason and CMC side. Yeah, the more I looked at it, it's very clear to me personally. Listen, Marvin, let's break him down. Marvin is, in my opinion, just as volatile as DK is. DK is clearly unhappy in Seattle right now, and there's 2 other legitimate options, JSN and Tyler Lockett. So DK's a big boomer bust. He's kind of going back to that all over again. Marv obviously has been definitely more on the boomer bust side, but Marvin is still, in my opinion, most weeks going to be the wide receiver 1. So I prefer Marv over DK at this point. Mason and CMC simply are just a better tandem than Bucky and Waddle. And again, I'm not convinced that CMC comes back, but here's the way I look at this. Bucky is, honestly, he's kind of going down, in my opinion, for fantasy value because, Todd Bowles seems pretty committed and pretty comfortable with just kind of going with the hot hand at running back. He said it earlier this week. And Sean Tucker, had he not done anything the other week, I would say he probably won't, all of a sudden start playing. But he got the opportunity last week, and he immediately capitalized on it. So it's okay, this could become a 3-headed monster. Regardless, he's never going to handle the backfield. One of those 2, between Mason and CMC, we already know they're handling everything out of the backfield. Waddle is in fantasy football purgatory. He's in jail without Tua. I mean, that's just the reality. He is in fantasy football jail until Tua gets back. And again, I just expressed the reasons why I have a problem with Tua and the reporting I've seen with Tua. So, definitely Marv Mason, CMC is the side I would take here. Appreciate the super chat. Jeremy Melendez, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Have Garrett Wilson and Adams. Is that a good thing, or should I look to move one? If so, which one? Also have Monty and Gibbs, and that's worked for me so far. So let me explain the difference between the 2 really quick. So with Montgomery and Gibbs, it's so unique. It is the most unique backfield in the entire NFL. last year there was only 2 teams that sustained basically top 15 production for both running backs year long. It was the Detroit Lions and the Miami Dolphins. Mostert and Achane, they complemented each other. And Achane got a lot of pass catching work. That was kind of what kept his game going. Monty and Gibbs both serve 2 different roles in this offense. And their formula at running the ball is so unbeatable in Detroit that it's different. It's a different scenario here. I'm on board with Monty and Gibbs. I've said before you could start them every week on the same team, but it's a different situation. Garrett Wilson and Adams, I've seen this quite a bit because they were actually drafted relatively close to each other, and you most of the time got them at the 1-2 turn, right? So Garrett Wilson, again, I prefer to sell him rather than Adams because Adams has the connection built in with Aaron Rodgers. It's already there. It's already built in. So it just makes more sense for me to move Adams or to move Wilson, especially since there's a big market of people, as I've been talking about for the past 3 days. There's a big market of people who really believe that he's the beneficiary of this. And I'm telling you guys, I'm willing to bet, pretty decent amount of money that I think Adams is going to be the better play from here on out in fantasy football than Garrett Wilson. Not here on out, Garrett Wilson will never have a better week than him. But I think if the season started today in week 7 and we went to week 17, I think if we look back, just week 7 through 17, Adams will be the better receiver on the season than Garrett Wilson is in New York. So I would try to sell Garrett Wilson now while I can. That's how fast things change in fantasy. Weeks ago, I called him a buy low, and I felt really good afterwards, and then they traded for Adams, and it's all out the window for me personally. That's how fast fantasy changes. But yes, I would try to move Garrett Wilson. Appreciate the super chat. Samuel Piazza, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Crazy to start Maye over Kyler this week. 14 team. Man, I love the stones because it's not crazy at all. It's not crazy. It just takes stones. It takes stones. I mean, it takes stones to do this type of move. Anytime you've got a big name player that's underperforming, but you're playing him because of the big name and the potential that they have to break out, or not to break out, to boom, versus a player who is just bursting, he's just coming onto the scene. He's on the come up, right? So that takes some stones to do. I'm totally fine with it because again, the funny thing is, I actually, for a minute, considered making Drake Maye my quarterback starter this week instead of who did I make my quarterback start of the week? Why am I blanking out on my quarterback start of the week all of a sudden? It'll come to me. Daniel Jones. Yeah. I decided to go against 2 Patriots because I didn't want that to blow up in my face. Maye is not a bad start this week. He's just not. Kyler, I think, actually has a rough go this week. He's got the Chargers on Monday night, and Kyler's running into rough times right now. I mean, he really, really is. So I have no problem with this, actually. If it was me, I'll be honest with you, I would do it. I would do it. Again, it takes stones, man. You got some stones to ask that question. I don't think it's crazy at all. But I'm a little crazy sometimes, maybe. So I would start Maye over him, though, personally. I would definitely go with Drake Maye over Kyler. And if it blows up in my face, that's fine. That's fine. Because Kyler is the type of guy that every week he's going to give you something different. I'm going to go with Kyler. Or I'm going to go with Drake Maye. The matchup's too good. Appreciate the super chat. Next up was Tyler C. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Hey, man, 10-team 0.7 PPR. That's interesting. Start Tay over Evans because of the hamstring injury. Other starting receivers are Sun God and Flowers. Thanks for the input. Yeah, always. Well, here's the deal. I wish I could tell you that you need to start Tay over over Evans because I believe it personally, but I don't think you're going to have a choice. I don't think Evans is going to play. I'd be shocked if he plays. Mike Evans got this injury in practice this week, and he missed the last 2 days of practice. Okay, I'm reading. Joe Bucks fan says it seems he's trending that way to play. He missed yesterday's practice, and I know he missed today's practice, so I don't know how he's trending to play. Again, they have Saturday. It's a Monday night game, so we'll see what his practice report is tomorrow. That's why he hasn't been ruled out yet. But he missed practice yesterday, and he missed it today. So, I don't understand how he's trending towards playing, personally. So, I have a feeling he may be out. Either way, I'm going to go with Davante Adams, personally. Because Adams is just in... Again, I love the start this week with Adams. I like it with Evans, too, I'll be honest. I think the Evans play is going to be really strong this week. But I don't think that he's going to make it. Either way, I would play Davante Adams considering the new injury that we got with Mike Evans. Appreciate the super chat. Johnny Pena, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Tracy, Legette, or Watson at the flex. Half PPR. I'm playing Tracy. Yeah, I'm playing Tyler. It's close between Legette and him this week, I'll say, because Singletary is expected to return, and Tracy is still expected to get a big workload with Devin Singletary, which can be taken in 2 directions, right? It can be taken as a good thing that he's still going to be involved, or it can be taken as, is this a Bucky Irving situation where there's just not quite as much upside? I think either one is a fair question to ask. Legette, the matchup's great. There's no question this matchup is pretty sweet opportunity for Legette. He's going up against the Commanders' defense this week. I love the matchup personally. I think he's in line to be a great play this week. Not a great play, but definitely has a great opportunity to be a really good play this week. And I'm not playing Watson. I mean, I'm not in on the Watson deal. I'm just not personally. Watson is a very, very high upside, super low floor start. And I would put it 70% of the time he's going to hit his floor, not his ceiling. Because he's not like a possession receiver who's getting you a bunch of production over the middle of the field. That's not what he does. So you basically have to bank on him hitting a big play. Legette, he's starting to kind of develop his game a little bit. Tracy, I don't hate I actually kind of low-key think the matchup's pretty good. I'm going to go with Legette because of the matchup here versus the Commanders. And I do think that it's clear he's the wide receiver 2 in this offense, and Dalton can deliver. So I'm going to go with Legette over Tracy this week. Appreciate the super chat, Johnny. Richard Cranium, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Best FF Viz, man. Well, first of all, I appreciate you. I like this guy, Richard Cranium. Seen you before several times. Can you help me pick 2 wide receivers and 1 flex from the list, please? Jaden Reed, Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill, Jay Williams, I'm assuming is Jamison Williams, and Shakir. Eckler, Mostert, Rashad White. Okay. Jaden's going to my lineup. Deebo's going to my lineup. Those are my 2 must-play guys without question. And it comes down to Tyreek Hill or Jamison Williams. Again, it shouldn't come as a surprise at all, guys. What you've seen all week, if you've been watching me, from me, is I'm at the point where it's I don't have a problem going with a lot of guys over Tyreek. Because here's the thing, is Tyreek, at this point, relies on a big play. And it's 20-80, whether he hits the big play or not. Most of the time, it's not going to hit. One of these weeks, it will. I'm okay with it on my bench at this point. And Jamison, he's getting basically the same amount of work as Tyreek has over the time that Tua has been gone. And Jamison, I actually do think is a low-key good play this week against a really tough defense that I think Goff is going to struggle against with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think that Jameson's going to have plenty of good work. I'm going Jameson as my third guy. Over all those running backs, too. I'm going Jaden Reed, I'm going Debo, and I'm going Jameson Williams. Appreciate the super chat tonight. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, guys. And best way to get your question answered immediately is doing a super chat. Next up, we've got Jesus Valdez. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Jesus, one of the two. Najee or Mason? Start 2, Reed, Flowers, or Douglas? Definitely Mason. 100% Mason. Did I read today that Jordan Mason no longer has an injury designation? I think I may have read that. Jordan Mason. He remains in non-contact jersey during Friday's practice. Oh, no, I read status is up in the air. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this one's risky for sure, but here's the deal. If he plays, I'm playing him. I mean, then the good thing is, like, you can wait to kind of figure out, like, who's going to be playing, because Najee's the Sunday night game and Mason is at 3:30 Central Time. So you're going to have plenty of time to make this decision here. I'm going Mason personally over Najee. And, of course, if Mason doesn't play, you've got to start Najee. That's fine. Reed, Flowers, or Douglas. I'm going Reed, I'm going Zay. Yeah, it's Douglas again. Douglas is a good flex play. Must start, like, flex type of play. But Jaden Reed doesn't go on my bench. Maybe I'm different. I think I am different than a lot of fantasy creators out there. I think I'm higher on Jaden Reed. Like, I view him as a Deebo Samuel type. I really do. A guy that doesn't go on your bench because his upside's ridiculous. And Flowers, he's running hot. And I do think this is actually a particularly good matchup for him against a bad Bucs defense. So I can't picture myself putting Douglas in over either of those two guys. Appreciate the super chat tonight. Jonathan Paisley, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Legette, Downs, McConkey, or Bigsby? Flex PPR. Legette, Downs, McConkey, or Bigsby? It's tough. It's between Legette and Bigsby because I really like Bigsby this week. However, we don't know if ETN's playing. I saw earlier today his status is potentially game time call, is what they're calling him right now. If it is just Tank Bigsby, I'm playing Tank. I love the matchup. I called him a must start this week, and this is the type of group of guys that I would play him over. But again, the only thing that gives me pause is I don't know if ETN's playing or not. I have no idea. I would think he's not playing, like just based on his week-to-week status he was given earlier in the week. I just don't see how he would play. But if Bigsby was to be with ETN, I would say Legette would be the play that I prefer. So for me, it goes Tank Bigsby if he's by himself, and if he's not by himself, then Xavier Legette. Appreciate the super chat. John Doe, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Bench 1, DK, Neighbors, Dell, or Adams? DK, Neighbors, Dell, or Adams. I'm going to bench... I'll bench Tank Dell. Neighbors doesn't go on my bench. Adams this week I've got a lot of conviction on. And DK, I'm just not going to sit DK. I get it. It's been a little rough lately. More than a little rough. It's been pretty rough. But I kind of just don't think I'd be willing to bench DK in favor of Tank Dell. Tank Dell definitely has upside. No question about it. But I'm gonna go ahead and play DK, Neighbors, and Devontae. I'll bench Tank Dell. There's just not enough there for me to bench DK. That's the one guy I would slightly consider, I guess, because it's been a bad couple weeks for DK. I look at it as Tank Dell, but like more upside, obviously. I'll bench Dell. Appreciate the super chat. Top 5 low darks. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat tonight. Flex Wandale, Worthy, Najee, or Mostert. I will play. I was gonna say Wandale, but I mean Wandale and Worthy both have really good matchups. Is it a PPR league? If it is a PPR league, I'll play Wandale because his upside is guaranteed in a full PPR league. If it's a half PPR or a full or a standard standard league, I will personally play Worthy because the upside is there. I think on more of a big play basis than it is with a guy like Xavier Worthy. Yeah, I just think it makes more sense. I think it just makes more sense. If you're in a full PPR league, I'll play Wandale. If you play in a half PPR league, I'll go with Worthy. Or standard league. Appreciate the super chat. Riley Penny, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Trade Amon-Ra for Brees, full PPR. Ooh, that's tough. That's really tough. Let's look at them both closely. Because when we're talking about trades like this, where they're both high upside players, but somewhat have underperformed this year, we have to split hairs. Because they both have the potential to be really good. Amon-Ra St. Brown, it may shock you. By the way, what you're seeing on the screen, these aren't my rankings. These are not my season-long rankings. This is what we have up to this point, fantasy football points. See, fantasy points up here. This is in order from best to worst. These are not my personal rankings. I have them ranked differently. Amon-Ra St. Brown on the year is wide receiver 20. I mean, this is a disappointment. It's a big disappointment. 13.3 fantasy points per game. It's above guys that are in this general range. Like, wide receiver 13 and, like, a couple guys above him is kind of where he, like, technically should be, but they were on a bye last week, so it doesn't really count. Amon-Ra St. Brown, though, he's been consistent, but he's been kind of consistently mid for the, I shouldn't say that. No, he's been pretty dang good. He's had a touchdown the past 3 games. The offense I love. And the only thing that concerns me is, like, you can see it. Like, they're sparing him for playoffs. In my opinion, that's what I see. Like, 6 targets, 18 targets versus Tampa. That was an outlier week, by far. 8 targets, 6 targets, 4 targets. And keep in mind, the Seattle game was competitive. The Tampa game was competitive. And the Rams game was competitive. That wasn't like all blowouts. Like last week, they crushed the Cowboys. They beat them like a bald-headed stepchild. I mean, it was an embarrassment for the Cowboys. So it doesn't worry me that he got 4 targets in that type of game. What worries me is if you just look at it season long, like there's just not a ton of targets. I think that he's gonna be fine. And then with Brees is the running back 10 on the season right now. 13.4 fantasy points per game in a half PPR format. And Brees Hall, again, you take out those 2 weeks, he's been pretty phenomenal. Like, the receiving upside is always there. Dude's averaging close to 5 targets per game, basically. And he's really good as a receiver. The rushing upside, when given the freaking rock, is really good. So, yeah, it depends. I prefer Brees Hall, like if it was just in a perfect scenario, if my wide receivers were great and my running backs were both great and I didn't need a particular upgrade at either position, Brees would be my guy. But they're both such good options that I would say, depending on what your situation is the way I would move. If you're weak at wide receiver and Amon-Ra is like your number 1 and your number 2 is somebody like if your number 2 is somebody like a Devonta Smith or a DK Metcalf or a DJ Moore, I'd feel a little bit more ambivalent about sending away Amon-Ra St. Brown. But if your wide receiver 2 was Malik Neighbors or your wide receiver 2 was Stephon Diggs or Drake London, then I'm feeling pretty good about sending away Amon-Ra St. Brown. If your running backs are really strong and you need wide receivers, then Amon-Ra St. Brown's the move. But if your running backs are weak and your wide receivers are really strong, then Breece makes sense. So I would leave that up to you and say, depending on what your strength is, that's the way I would move here. Because they're both great options. In a perfect world, if I'm comfortable at both running back and wide receiver, I would take Breece Hall personally. Appreciate the super chat. Dizzy B, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Is Cooper startable now or wait and see? I'll give you an example. I'm starting him right away. 100%. In a dynasty league, I'm putting him right in my lineup. I mean, because my options in the dynasty league are like Tyrone Tracy Jr. this week, and who else do I have as a potential option in that league? I've got several guys on bye, so I'm like in a way, forced to play him, but I would play him over, I have Keenan Allen in that same dynasty league, for example. Even if Keenan Allen was taking on the Panthers, I would play Amari personally. Amari's going to come in right away and be the number one. It's not like they're trading for a young player who still needs development in the NFL. Amari's a pro. He's been around the league. He knows the game. So I don't worry about, Amari's upside, right away. It makes sense. He's going to be fine. So, yeah, I would definitely play Amari in a lot of situations. It depends on what your stack of guys is that you're dealing with. But yeah, Amari's definitely a playable option. 100%. Appreciate the super chat, man. John Doe, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. My opponent has Marvin Harrison, MCB. Do I play Kyler and 49ers defense or Maye and the Chargers? McBride. Yeah. I see what you're saying. It's good to hedge your bet and play Kyler when your opponent has Marvin. It makes sense to do that because, anytime Marvin is going to get points, Kyler is going to get points as well. I guess they're not that far off to where I would do this. Where I would start Drake Maye still. May I play Kyler if you didn't have the scenario, but that's good context to add because he's got 2 Cardinals pass catchers here. He's got 2 Cardinals pass catchers, so anytime those guys get any fantasy points, they'll be attributed to Kyler, and Kyler has to score with them. Yeah, I think I'd probably do it because I'll make it clear. If you were in a position where you were looking at, if you were in a position where it was, Drake Maye versus, Deshaun Watson, and your opponent had, I don't know, your opponent had Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku, I would say that doesn't worry me enough to sit the quarterback I definitely prefer. But with Kyler, he's still a good option this week to a point. And your opponent has 2 Cardinals pass catchers. Yeah, I'd probably play Kyler and the 49ers defense. Appreciate the super chat. Riley Penny, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Also, full PPR start 2. Connor Douglas, Achane, and Bigsby. I would go with Tank if he's by himself and ETN doesn't play. So let's do 2 versions. Let's play the ETN doesn't play version. I'm going Tank, and I'm going with James Conner. If ETN does play, I'm going with Douglas and James Conner. Either way, Conner's in the lineup. Connor's a better option than Achane. And again, I'm looking for guys that I could play over Achane. And both those guys, Douglas and Bigsby, fit the billing. So if Tank is by himself, it's going to be Tank and Connor for me. And if ETN is there, it's going to be Connor and Douglas for me personally. Appreciate the super chat. Tyler Sperry, what's going on, man? Appreciate the super chat. Love or Jalen and drop Bigsby or Tracy? Love or Jalen or drop Bigsby or Tracy? I know we discussed that the other day. It was either yesterday or Wednesday when we discussed dropping one of those two running backs. And I see your chat down at the bottom, which is, I asked the RB question because my bench is a mess. It sucks that you have to give up one of those running backs. It really does. Like, I can't lie to you. That really sucks because I want to keep both of them. But if I had to choose, I would drop Tank because he's not the longer-term solution. Whereas, again, like, I'm making a gut call here, which is that both of these guys, Tank and Tyrone Tracy Jr., I fully believe have the upside to be their team's number one running back at some point in the year. I think it'll be Tracy before it'll be Tank. Because, like, I think that Tank needs ETN to get traded away. Or for ETN to, like, be put on IR or something like that. I don't see him taking the job outright because the Jags have a lot of capital attached to him. First round pick, and he's a good player that has trade upside. So they kind of have to play him to, like, send him away if that's what they want to do. And I think it is what they want to do. So Bigsby, I think, has a tougher path to becoming the team's number one running back. Whereas Tracy, like, they didn't give Singletary, they gave him money for sure. Like, they gave him plenty, but, like, they didn't give him enough to, like, never sit Singletary regardless of what happens. Like, Singletary hasn't been bad again, but Tracy's just been the flat-out better option. The flat-out better option. So, like, I prefer Tracy long-term between himself and Tank, but I do like them both, obviously. That's why I say it sucks they have to give one of them up. And I'm going with Love. I mean, the matchup for Jordan Love is the matchup for Jordan Love, I think, versus the Texans. Like, the matchup doesn't matter. And the Texans is a tough defense, but the matchup doesn't really matter because he's so good. He's such a good player, and the offense is so well run that, like, and this is a very high over-under. I think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. It's in Green Bay. Jordan Love has been great in fantasy. Jalen Hurts, I get it. I actually think this is a low-key tough game for the. I actually think the Eagles are going to lose. That's kind of my bold prediction of the week. I think the Eagles are going to lose to the Giants. And I think that Jalen's going to throw a couple picks. The Giants' defense is good. I'm going to go with Jordan Love over Jaden. And I'll drop Bigsby or over Tracy. And I see you said Singletary plays Jags stink, but ETN is a game-time decision. I get what you're saying, but you can't look at this. If you're dropping one of these two guys, you have to understand one of them's getting picked up. Either way. Like, even if Tracy goes if you drop Tracy, someone's picking him up. Like, there's enough doubt floated out that Tracy takes over the backfield. And I've been calling it. Like I said, I think this is very, very possible. So it's not like you're going to get off scot-free if you cut Tyrone Tracy Jr. You're not. Like, he's getting picked up. But so would Bigsby. One of those two, that's why it sucks. Either one of those guys, whoever you drop, they're going to get picked up. It's just going to happen. It's flat out going to happen. So you can't play it short term. And I get it. Tank's the better short term play this week, for sure. But you've got to play long term. If you're dropping one of them, they're gone. They're gone. The only way you're going to get them back is if you trade for them. That's why I hate saying to drop one of them. Because it sucks. I don't think you're going to get them back. So you have to kind of bake it in that they're not going to be there anymore on the waiver wire. Unless you get really lucky and your team doesn't pay attention, your league doesn't pay attention, you're not getting them back. So you have to kind of kiss one of them goodbye. And that's why I look season long when I'm dropping one of them, because they're going to be gone. And I would rather punt away Bigsby, because I think he has a tougher path to being the running back one season long. Appreciate the super chat, man. We'll go answer some questions up at the top. The best way to get your question answered immediately is to do a super chat. You can see, how much is going on in the chat right now. So we're going to go back up towards the top and start answering some questions up there. Let's see. I can trade for Neighbors, but I'd have to give up one of these. Saquon, Montgomery, or Kenneth Walker. Who would you choose? If you can trade Monty for Neighbors, I would do it. I love Montgomery. I think he's a great player. And I start him basically every week, except if I can afford to. I wouldn't start him this week. But getting Malik Neighbors is just simply too excellent. And if I can hang on to Saquon, or if I can hang on to Kenneth, I'm going to. If I can hang on to both those guys, I will, because I think they have more long-term upside than Monty does. So yeah, if I give up one of them, it would be Montgomery to get him. Vic TX 361, appreciate the super chat. Love or Cousins? Both great options. I love both of them. That's tough. I'll be honest with you. That's a tough one. They're both really good options. I think I'd lean. Let's look at Kirk over the last several games. Kirk's the quarterback 14 right now in fantasy. And his last 2 games, 35 points, obviously crushed the Bucks, and 12.5. So, really, if you kind of take out that massive 500-yard game, that is so crazy, and it won't happen again. He's been mid at quarterback. Love, on the other hand, his production has been a lot more sustainable. 17 points in week 1, 31 in week 2, 17 in week 5, and 26 in week 6. That dude, and by the way, this is actually kind of conservative scoring right here, because this isn't scoring for quarterbacks is different in a lot of formats. So, Love, I think Love just has a higher ceiling. And the matchup is just as high upside for scoring for Jordan Love this week as it is for Kirk. I'm going to go with Jordan Love. The only way I would go with Kirk Cousins is if I had a stack with Drake London or a Trey McBride. Or, it's not even worth it for Michael Wilson. The only way I would do it is if there was a stack with Michael Wilson. Okay, scratch what I said. That was Cardinals talk. The only way I would play Kirk is if I had the stack of London, Mooney, or maybe Kyle Pitts. But if I don't have that stack, I don't feel worried about pairing the two. So I'm going to go with Jordan Love. Appreciate the super chat. JS Jaywalk, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat tonight. Goff at quarterback and Minnesota defense. Do I play Goff and stream Los Angeles, or stream Anthony Richardson, Stafford, Jones, or Maye and play Minnesota? No deduction for defensive yards allowed. Return yards equals 1 point per 10 yards. So, you're getting a point for every 10 yards on a return. It's a pretty sweet deal. That's a cool way to play defense. I'll be honest, I like that way of playing defense. I don't want to play Goff this week. I really don't. Especially since they're playing the Vikings defense. I would rather stream quarterback and play Minnesota's defense. Because I think, like, even though I have the Rams defense ranked higher than Minnesota this week, I don't want to play Goff. And I listen, like, the Vikings defense is so freaking good that I don't have a problem with playing them. I would stream Daniel Jones, my start of the week at quarterback, over Anthony Richardson, over Stafford for sure. Maye is the guy, like I said, like there was a minute where I considered putting Maye as my quarterback start of the week, but I didn't do it because I didn't want to put two Patriots in the same video. But just like, understand this. I really like playing Drake Maye this week. It makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, I would personally play Jones over Maye still, but I mean, Maye's not a bad play. I'll play Daniel Jones and I'll play Minnesota's defense. Appreciate the super chat. Brian03. Appreciate the super chat. Start Njoku or Auden, and does Kamara get traded away? I would play Njoku over Auden because Njoku is my start of the week at the tight end position. I think he's in much better shape without Amari Cooper. And hey, listen, I think that, you know, as bad as Deshaun Watson is and as much as he sucks, and I won't give him a break for it because he does, David Njoku, he does get, like, shorter targets that Deshaun Watson can actually throw. Like, Deshaun Watson can't really do anything except, like, throw a couple yards down the field. David Njoku last week also, once I can find him because he's buried down here, David Njoku, 7 targets last week. So he's getting his footing back in his offense. So I like David Njoku this week. And does Kamara get traded away? I don't think the Rams will do it, personally. I think from an NFL perspective, this is kind of not a fantasy question. This is more geared towards NFL, which I'm totally good with. But I'm taking off, like, I love the NFL. I watch the NFL. Like, I'm a fan first. So, like, I can always talk football. Taking my fantasy cap off for a minute, I think that the Saints would benefit from trading away Kamara. I personally think that because what are they going to do this year? Their season's over. It's over. And it's not like they have a quarterback of the future that they're just dealing, like, obviously they're dealing with a bunch of injuries right now, but it's not like they have the quarterback of the future and they're just getting unlucky right now. Like, Carr's not their future. And I think it's been made clear. Like, even though he's injured right now, the guy he's collapsed since week 3. So, like, it doesn't make sense why they'd keep Kamara at this point. But Kamara is on the last year of his deal. So, like, it doesn't make a ton of sense for a team to trade for him unless they're in contending shape. Like, the only way it would make sense is if, I'm trying to think of a contender, like the Chiefs. The Chiefs would be a great option to trade for him, but I don't think they will. But wouldn't that be awesome though? If the Chiefs traded for Kamara, who in the world, put it in the chat, isn't that a great trade idea? Chiefs trade for Alvin Kamara, that would be awesome. Unless we get like a big contender trading for him, I don't see who would. So I don't think that it would probably happen. But it makes sense to do it. I just don't think it would happen. Appreciate the super chat. Nate Dogg, what's going on, my man? Should I try to trade Hill and Dobbins for JJ and Walker? My other trade was a dead end. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, I mean, listen. It makes a lot of sense to do this move because JJ is the better option than Hill and Walker's the better option than Dobbins. I don't know if they're going to take that though. Like, honestly, I don't think you'll get away with it, but I would send it and see if it could happen. You may have to include somebody else in there, which, I can't remember exactly what team you're talking about. But I would send it and see what they said, but I have a feeling that you're going to have to give a little bit more. But send it and see how it goes, because that's a move I would do personally. Appreciate the super chat, man. For Izil, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Maye or Murray? And Bigsby, Juju, Pop, or Goodson flex? Yeah, like I said earlier, if you are dealing with a situation where you don't have the stack potential of a Trey McBride or a Marvin, I would play Maye. I would play Drake Maye. I prefer Drake Maye this week over Kyler Murray. If you have Marvin and if you have McBride, I would play Kyler because they're close. They're really, really close for me. But I'm cool with playing Drake Maye this week. Like 100%. This matchup is great. It's against the Jags defense that's disgraceful. And yeah, I would definitely play Maye over Murray unless I was bound by the stack potential of one of those pass catching options. And then Bigsby, Juju, Pop, or Goodson at the flex. If Tank is by himself, I'll go with Bigsby. If ETN is there, I would go with... Since I told you to play Maye, I'm struggling to say I'd play Douglas. Because again, it just makes me really nervous to hedge my bet with two Patriots on the same team. That scares me. Even though the matchup's great and I like the direction they're heading in, we're too early on in the process with Maye for me to feel comfortable saying you could easily play two Patriots on the same team. That scares me. For that reason, if Tank is not on his own, and if it's Travis Etienne, I would play Juju over Pop Douglas because I just need to see it first. So I would play Maye over Murray unless I'm bound with the stack potential, and I would play Tank if he's alone. But if he's not alone, I would play Juju. Appreciate the super chat. We'll take a couple more questions, then we'll wrap it up for the night. Appreciate y'all being here. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And the best way to get your question answered last minute is to do a super chat. I'm just going to go up a couple ways and answer some questions really quick. Brian Thomas Jr. or Jameson Williams at flex? Happy PPR. Trent LG asks. I would go with Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's solid this week. I think he's really, really solid play. Especially Sam, epically Sam Darnold or Aaron Rodgers. I would go with Darnold. I think Darnold's a fine play. Nathan Red, pick one. Pittman Jr., Harrison Jr., Juju, Demario Douglas, or Tracy Jr. I would go with... I'd go with Douglas. Or, I'm sorry, I'd go with Marvin. If Marvin plays, I'm going Marvin. Nate Dogg, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat, man. Should I add Chase Brown? Yes. I mean, Chase Brown, he shouldn't be on waivers. There's no way. Like, Chase Brown should not... Oh, I'm sorry. Add him to the trade. I think that's worth it. That's what it's going to take to get it done. And it's worth it to me. I would add Chase Brown to the mix. Appreciate the super chat. XO, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat tonight. What's good? Thoughts for this week? Jalen, Addison, Dobbs, Bijan, Gibbs, Kincaid, Juju. Bench, Schultz, Worthy, Pittman Jr., McConkey, Purdy, and Nico. So Jalen Hurts at quarterback, Addison and Dobbs at wide receiver, Bijan, Gibbs at running back, Kincaid at tight end, Juju in the flex. And you're obviously benching Nico. That's exactly the way I would play it. Unless I will say, unless you're in a half PPR or standard scoring format, if you were in one of those formats, I would play Worthy over Juju. But if you're in a PPR format, I would play Juju over Worthy. That's the only suggestion I would have, is if it's PPR, I would play Juju. But if it's half PPR or standard, I would play Worthy personally. But other than that, that's exactly the way I would play this one. Appreciate the super chat. Vic TX361, appreciate the super chat. PPR, Connor, Hunt, Mason, start 2. Hunt is definitely going in. And if Mason plays, I'll play Mason. If Mason doesn't play, obviously, Connor's a good play. Like, I like playing him this week. This is a tougher matchup for him versus the Chargers defense. That's not an easy matchup. But if you have to play him, like, you should feel comfortable playing him because he's a good option. But I would probably stick with Mason and Hunt if Mason plays. Appreciate the super chat. We'll answer a couple more questions. Drake or CeeDee Lamb rest of season? Louis Guan asks. Louis Guan. Good question. I mean, I did my wide receiver rankings for rest of season a couple weeks ago. A couple things have updated. I still prefer CeeDee over Drake London, personally, because ultimately I still do believe CeeDee does have a good end of the year. The only thing that concerns me with CeeDee right now is that, I mean, the dude looks like he's just, like, taking it easy since he got paid. Which, you know, is kind of crappy to see. I don't know if y'all heard this at all, but I heard Troy Aikman yesterday, I think it was. I heard him at least. Talking about how crappy the routes the Cowboys receivers are running. And he's, like, baffled by it. He's like, I mean, CeeDee Lamb needs to work on it big time. He's running lazy routes. And I was like, man, that should light a fire under the Cowboys players, considering, you know, what Troy Aikman means to that franchise. So, you know, with London, I love Drake London all of a sudden, obviously. He's the wide receiver 5 in fantasy. And he's the clear wide receiver 1. There's just something holding me back. There really is. They're not far off from each other, but I prefer CeeDee Lamb personally still over Drake London. And I'm going to go ahead and end it there for the night, guys. Appreciate y'all being in here tonight. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so on your way out. Take advantage of the Aaron Rodgers sweat-free projection on Underdog this week. It's at 0.5 total yards. And I will see you guys in tomorrow's must-start and sit videos. Must-start and sit running backs and wide receivers tomorrow. I'll see you on those videos. Enjoy the rest of your Friday.